Hello, and welcome back to Lauren's Legends. Yes, I am still alive, and I am not a missing 411 case. No, I have not posted in a while. Life got a little crazy there for a minute, and if you are interested in what has been going on, I posted a post in the community tab with all of the details. So, speaking of weird and crazy, today we are going to be diving into the Bermuda Triangle. We will be asking questions like, what did Columbus see? What kind of mysterious fog is there? Ghost ships? No thank you. Let's take a trip together across history, science, and of course, mystery. Fasten your seatbelts. This may be a bumpy ride into the abyss. Let's just hope we can come back from it. The Bermuda Triangle has been a source of wonder for as long as man has traveled through it. From Columbus sailing the ocean blue to spinning compasses, fake news, debunked theories, and those still unexplained. This area of the ocean fascinates me and many others immensely. An American author by the name of Vincent Gaddis would be the first person to call the stretch of ocean between Bermuda, San Juan, Puerto Rico, and back over to Miami, Florida, creating a triangle, the Bermuda Triangle. It isn't an officially recognized nautical entity, but these waters have been known as such ever since. The tales emerging from the area are that of vanishing planes, vanishing ships, ghost ships, and those ghost ships are ships that are found with no crew on them at all. We have reports of mechanical failures, electrical instrument failures, and other stranger events combined to create the legend we know today. So, what is really going on? Before I make my conclusion, let's go over some of the stories that intrigued me the most. First up, let's take a look at some of the planes and aerial events that vanished their way into the Bermuda Triangle legend. The most well-known mystery, of course, is that of Flight 19. You simply cannot do a Bermuda Triangle video without at least mentioning the 5 Navy bombers that went out for an easy training flight back in December of 1945. Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor was presiding over the exercise. There are rumors and differing reports that he may have been hungover or even sick, so he allowed one of the more inexperienced navigators to take charge of keeping the planes on course. This disappearance is one where there are plenty of radio transmissions and discourse for most of the flight. It is believed that Lieutenant Taylor lost his bearings, that he was thinking they were over the Florida Keys. At the same time, there were transmissions from an unknown crew member saying that he didn't know where they were. A series of messages confirmed this loss of direction, and the final chilling message cements what most suspect about this tragic event. Taylor can be heard saying that they have to turn to the west and go until they hit landfall or crash into the sea. This is exactly what the last message states. When the first plane gets under 10 gallons, we all drop with it. This makes me think that the wreckage that was never found should have all been together in a huge mess. Sure, it could have somewhat been scattered, but there should have been something, some debris, even a few pieces of a plane. There wasn't. Nothing was ever found. The first plane to be sent out to look for the lost Flight 19 was redirected from a different training mission in the area, and everything seemed to be fine with this plane for the first 3 minutes. But after that initial radio signal, 3 minutes into the search and rescue flight, it too would never be heard from again, nor was any wreckage ever found. Of course, reasons and explanations abound, but where is the debris? How were no pieces of 6 huge planes never found? Another really odd aerial disappearance happened not too long after that in 1947 when a Douglas C-54 plane found itself far off course without reason. The air traffic controller would redirect them with a proper bearing, but then it too was never heard from again, and no wreckage was ever found. Investigators were left with nothing but guesses yet again. Another similar event would occur in 1965, this time to a small private plane. So, in good news, the triangle doesn't discriminate. Mechanical problems with their equipment were reported, and then they were never found. Again, more inadequate explanations came from the authorities. The list of navigational instruments malfunctioning and compass spinning goes on and on. Planes off course and confused pilots galore leave the most curious with no real explanation for the mysterious phenomena occurring in this area. One of the most curious and intriguing stories is the well-known case of Bruce Gernon, author of Beyond the Bermuda Triangle. Bruce Gernon's story is one of the more famous and perhaps infamous tales to emerge, shrouded in the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. This story is interesting not just because of the details, but because Gernon is still alive today, and he has done many interviews that you can listen to and hear his insane story from him. This one routine flight he had made over a dozen times would become anything but typical. One day, with his father and a family friend named Chuck Lafayette, Gernon took off from the Andros Airport in a brand new Beechcraft Bonanza A36. It didn't take long after takeoff for them to notice a cloud forming. The cloud that they would never forget. Miami Control reported that the weather was good, so they flew above the cloud. By this time, the squall had formed an immense semicircle behind the plane, and when they looked ahead, a similar cloud was forming in front of them. They then realized it was somehow the same cloud that had gone behind and now was in front of them. They were in a donuts of sorts, and it was stretching for miles. They noted that the wall in front of them seemed to be coming out of the earth itself. This would scare me immensely, but Gernon was an experienced pilot, and when they spotted a U-shaped hole forming in the cloud, they made for it in an attempt to escape the ring. Like something out of a Marvel movie, they looked through this opening in the cloud to see a tunnel forming. Blue sky welcomed them on the other side, but when they entered the U-shape, the tunnel began to shrink. Gernon would report that they were only in the freaky tunnel for about 20 seconds, but that just before they escaped out the other side, he felt a moment of weightlessness before an inexplicable increase in forward momentum. After they escaped, a look back showed them that the hole in the strange cloud was closing behind them. All of the electrical equipment was malfunctioning. When he focused back in and tried to figure out where they were, although flying in a straight line, he could see the compass was slowly spinning. As if this isn't enough, when they contacted Miami Control to give their location, which they believed was 45 miles west of Bimini, the controller tells them that he cannot locate any plane in that area. Gernon was like, "Excuse me? What?" The sky that had looked blue through the opening in the cloud tunnel was now a dull white all around them. Visibility seemed to be about 2 miles, but there was no horizon, no ocean, no sky, no nothing. Gernon relates that he somehow felt his way west. He is quoted with saying, "This weird fog that we couldn't escape had persisted for 3 minutes or so." When the Miami controller said he picked up a plane traveling west directly over Miami Beach. But the weird thing is that they had only been in the air for roughly 34 minutes by this point. Thinking that he was still looking for the Bimini Islands, he told the Miami guy that he was flat wrong. That was until the fog broke and there below them was clearly Miami Beach. After landing, they realized the flight from the Andros Islands to Miami had taken them in total about 47 minutes from takeoff to landing on the ground. Why is that wild? Because this is something that he had never done in less than 75 minutes, even on a straight shot. What had happened? Gernon guesstimated they had gone 250 miles on their trip in 47 minutes. But what could cause such a time difference? Did the electric fog, as Gernon calls it, have such energy that it distorted time itself? The behavior of the cloud in this story begs belief, but why are there so many stories of equipment malfunction in this area? A possible answer is the idea that this spot on Earth has the perfect storm of electrical and magnetic anomalous phenomena. For instance, the agonic line passes through this area. This line indicates the points on the map where magnetic north and true north are one and the same. A practical application of this knowledge is that pilots usually have to account for the difference between the two when not traveling on the agonic line, or, normally when they are not in this area. Forgetting this fact can lead to navigational errors, which we know have led to many disastrous accidents. Also, I thought hurricane season was over, said no one in the Bermuda Triangle ever. If you look at a map overlaid with the paths of hurricanes through this area, you can't even see the little dot that would indicate Bermuda is actually on the map because there are so many lines. Any fans of meteorology, as I am myself, will also know that the presence of the Gulf Stream also contributes to the wild weather patterns that cause such devastation in the area. Now, combine that with the fact that the magnetosphere is weaker here than in other areas, and physicists have found similar behavior in this area to that of the North and South poles. So, we are also combining solar wind and cosmic radiation bouncing off the magnetosphere in unpredictable ways, most notably above northeastern Brazil and the Caribbean. Is all of this a coincidence? Maybe not. The triangle's history is littered with aerial disappearances and electrical disturbances going back as long as planes have been flying through it, all the way up to recent times. In 2017, there were 2 separate examples of flights losing contact or having electrical problems. Despite all of this, it is still a heavily flown area. Commercial, private, doesn't matter. All I know is that when I flew through the Bermuda Triangle in 2018 to Puerto Rico, I was definitely thinking in the back of my head that if something goes wrong, can it please just happen after my vacation? And I'm here today still, so that's good. But if you yourself are thinking that you are a little too creeped out to fly and maybe it'll be safer to take a boat, I'd think again. That's right. It's not just the planes that have problems and go missing or are otherwise prevented from reaching their destination safely. From Columbus to the Royal Caribbean, sailors have dreaded these waters for time untold. Speaking of old Chris Colombo and his perhaps hallucination-filled reports, remember y'all, drinking seawater will not quench your thirst. Despite this caveat, Columbus journals do report some very odd things in the area of the triangle. And no, I am not talking about mermaids. More conventional are the reports of the compasses not working properly. Erratic movement were his words to describe the needle spinning like so many others. He also wrote of fireballs falling into the ocean, which has been attributed to the green light sailors often speak of. But could it also be evidence, even back then, of some of the electric fog that Gernon was talking about? Obviously, the explorer's mind will have far more fantastical conclusions than modern day thoughts, but these writings are some of the earliest evidence that not all is calm out there in the waters of the triangle. One of the more interesting and noteworthy incidents of this is the story of the USS Cyclops. The USS Cyclops had a fairly normal history before being commissioned to help refuel and resupply British ships in World War I in the Caribbean. It was a cargo ship that frequently carried some pretty interesting chemicals. In mid-February of 1918, the Cyclops left Rio with, well, later reports have it that they had far too much manganese on board, which is a very heavy metal, and if it isn't stored correctly, it can corrode other metals, and the weight being so high could, in theory, easily sink a ship. When investigators would later look into the mystery of this ship, they would find reports of a crack in one of the engines. This crack was irreparable in Brazil and could only be fixed in Maryland. The fateful run's destination. Of course, there is a storm involved and rumors of a sighting on the 6th of March by another ship, but the USS Cyclops was set to arrive March 13th in Baltimore. The crew, the cargo, and the ship itself were never seen or heard from again. No wreckage, no distress call, nothing. Another disappearance, and perhaps the most famous missing ship of the Triangle, is the SS Cotapaxi. Actually, I should amend that because the Huffington Post reports that it actually has now been found off of St. Augustine. A distress signal in December of 1925, previously unreported, was discovered, and evidence led researchers and explorers to find the wreck. Yes, I know St. Augustine isn't exactly in the Bermuda Triangle, but its proximity has sparked believers in the area's mystical properties to hone in on this story. That's not to mention the fact that Spielberg featured it in the Close Encounters of the Third Kind as being found in the Gobi Desert. This kind of thing was regular in pop culture as the imagination was taken by the idea of the ship completely disappearing. I mean, there was a report in 2015 that this ship had been floating around missing for 100 years that caught so much wind on the internet that Snopes had to do an article debunking that it was in fact the same ship. Why this exact one was so popularized is really anybody's guess, but you guys know how these things can take off. Marine biologist Michael Barnett would be the one to finally find the wreck of the missing SS Cotapaxi. There is a popular wreck off the coast of St. Augustine that divers called Bear Wreck for quite some time. Rumor has it that it was called this because it's half buried in sand and there is so much vegetation on it, it appeared to have the fur of a bear. When the show Shipwreck Secrets hooked up with Barnett, they would uncover the truth of the wreck and finally identify it as the missing Cotapaxi. Mystery solved. Well, at least the location was, but as to why it went down, that's another tale lost to the triangle. A further aspect of the triangle that cannot be overlooked is the number of abandoned ships that have been found. These ghost ships have no one on board, which rationality would suggest it simply means the crew abandoned the ship. Some, like the Rosalie, have plausible explanations, while others, such as the Ellen Austin and the Carol A. Deering, escape closure. Let's take a second and talk about the Rosalie for a moment. Even though this ship has answers, the crew still had a harrowing experience to encounter. The Rosalie entered the Triangle headed to Cuba in the fall of 1840. The ship was found abandoned, but everything was intact, saleable, and there were animals still alive on board. However, the Lloyd's of London, the original insurance company, kept historical records on the ships they insured, obviously. They reported that the crew of this ghost ship had been rescued from a reef 2 weeks before the ship was seen floating without a crew. The ship apparently had run aground and the crew had abandoned the ship. Then it appears that the water rose and the ship floated away after the crew had already been rescued, and they were all gone to find the ship floating later. Next up is the story of the Carol A. Deering. This one is of particular interest to me because of its effect on the legend of the Triangle as a whole. This is an instance where the real mystery for me is unfortunately overshadowed by sensationalism and ulterior motives of a lighthouse keeper. The story goes that the Deering was found abandoned in January of 1929. The dinner table had been set and looked ready to eat, as well as the sails undamaged and unfurled. However, the lifeboats were gone, and there was no sign of its 12 crewmen or its captain. Of course, an investigation was launched, and it would be reported that just 2 days before being found abandoned, the Deering had passed the Cape Lookout lightship and reported that it had lost both of its anchors and was otherwise seaworthy and continued on. Per usual, theories abounded, not least of all mutiny, piracy, but why leave a perfectly good ship behind if that was the case? Now, if this wasn't enough of a mystery, 3 months later, a message in a bottle would be found by one Chris Columbus Gray. That's right, Columbus' namesake fancies he found himself proof because the letter stated in the bottle that the ship had been captured by an oil-burning ship. Little did Chris know that handwriting analysis had improved dramatically in that day, and 5 months later, it would be concluded that he had written and contrived the message himself. Apparently, he really wanted to work at Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, and he thought that discrediting the people on duty back in January would land him a gig, and spoilers, it did not. This story really frustrates me because the nefarious and the opportunistic use of the mystery has overshadowed the search for the truth and left behind the disappearance of the captain and crew just that, a mystery. Lastly, I want to mention the story of the Ellen Austin and its voyage of 1881. This is another example of a tale that has fueled the fires of mystique surrounding the Bermuda Triangle. The widely accepted story, which has many variations and inconsistencies, is loosely as follows. The Ellen Austin was sailing from Liverpool to New York on its normal route when it came across what was then known as a derelict ship, essentially meaning it was floating along with no one on board, a ghost ship. Now, practically minded sailors of the time were cautious of pirates, so the Ellen Austin simply shadowed the unnamed vessel for a time and finally discerned it wasn't a pirate playing possum. So a crackboarding team scurry over to the boat and find no one at all but a precious cargo of mahogany. Score! So they begin to sail it along with them, hoping to reap the extra reward, but a storm would separate the two ships not long after. A couple of days after the storm abated, the Ellen Austin found its quarry once more, except the crew members who had gone aboard were nowhere to be found. So this crew has people on it. The ship goes missing. They find it, but the crew's gone. There's 2 crews that have just disappeared on the ship. So let's get back to the accounts, and they say another team went across, while others say they simply tried to tow the boat with them, because that would make sense. That would be a 3rd crew, and we don't need any more crews to go missing. Regardless, common wisdom has it that the boat with the valuable mahogany would vanish in another storm, never to be seen again. Fantastical and mysterious to be sure, but is it all true though? Or is it more sensationalism adding to the myth? Of course, where would we look for hard evidence? You guessed it. The only people that will always have the biggest interest in their ships would be the insurance company. The good old Lloyd's of London, again, of course, has the record on the Ellen Austin, which completely blows a ghost ship size hole in all of this. Now, before we get into all that, I do want to take a second and mention the book that was published by the United States Hydrographic Office about the number of abandoned ships still floating around in the Atlantic. Their study is from 1887 to 1893. They believe that roughly 1,600, that's right, 1,600 abandoned ships were found in 7 years, floating around unmanned in the high seas. So at least the first part of the story is plausible, not least of all the idea that a captain would try to haul extra cargo to his destination. Now, back to the Lloyd's of London's insurance investigators report is where things go off course. The northerly course that would have been taken from Liverpool to New York, one that doesn't go south to the Bermuda Triangle. And their biggest finding of everything that they looked at and all of the oddities is they report 0 casualties. No one was reported missing from the crew of the Ellen Austin, meaning that unless someone is simply lying, no one got onto that derelict ship. When the ship left the port, there had to have been a crew or else there was never anyone on it. And then that begs the question, was there insurance fraud and that's why the boat even left? There's just no answers here except on the insurance report, 0 casualties and nobody missing. So are the stories of the Taylor's distress, lost ships, ghost ships, crazy seas simply those stories? Or do they add up to something more? I'm always left wondering about the lack of wreckage in those cases where the vessels disappear without a trace. Rogue waves have been cited as a possible explanation. These waves that are a superposition of smaller waves that build up and build and combine into sometimes 100-foot walls of water that happen so suddenly that all trace of the ship is destroyed and never seen again. That's the part that gets me. In all of these cases, just no trace at all left behind. To this day, has never been found. And I know that I'm not the only one that is questioning where all the debris is. So we've now come to the more esoteric theories that I've heard. The most intriguing is the idea that the Bermuda Triangle actually contains a wormhole to another dimension or place. Reports of time slippage and that of electric fog, combined with the UFO sightings over the years, can make one wonder. Could all of that electrical energy rolling around the area combined with the extreme weather patterns have opened up a portal to a different time and place? It makes me picture Amelia Earhart sitting next to the guys from Flight 19 on some magical island stuck in time somewhere. Then there is, of course, the mystery of the Bimini Road being in the area as well. The clear and intentional design of the structure underwater, which It's led to a lot of speculation. Is it man-made? Is it not? I mean, I personally, it looks too cut. The speculation has, they think it might be an alien landing zone and Atlantean highways. Such things stretch plausibility, of course, but what of the huge methane gas deposits scientists have reported coming from the bottom of the ocean in these areas? Apparently, they are believed to just shoot up from the bottom of the ocean to the surface, and the ships that are up on the surface are shot up into the air. For me, it will always and forever still come back to there being no wreckage for these lost vessels. The Atlantic is extremely deep here as well, so maybe, just maybe, the wildness of the ocean is simply hiding a plethora of answers in its unreachable depths. In conclusion, where does that leave us? The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration doesn't recognize the Bermuda Triangle as an official area on the map, and of course, the ocean is dangerous in general. Statistics reported by the NOAA point to the fact that the frequency of maritime incidents in the triangle is no higher than any other well-trafficked area of the ocean. So why do these stories and this location fascinate us so? What is really going on in this dangerous part of the ocean? For me, it's clearly the delicious combination of fantastical sailing, mythology, the trauma of dealing with hurricanes, and the fury of both sea and air being widespread in the region, and human penchants for sensationalist drama to overtake our imagination. Many of these stories detail lost lives and tragic happenings at sea. While the mysteries are intriguing, it is important to remember all of those who never made it safely through. I don't think that there is any one explanation, honestly, and within each case can be found the confirmation bias any would-be conspiracy theorist would wish to find. I do know this though, all of these stories and events certainly combine to make this one of the wildest areas on the planet, and one that will continue to hold our imagination forever. But what do you think? What do you think about the mysterious fog? Does it scare you to think about traveling through this area? Have you traveled through this area? And have you experienced anything strange yourself in the Bermuda Triangle? Please let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching till the end of this video. And if you are still here with me, please place a wave emoji in the comments to show me who my real MVPs are. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I will see you in the next one.